Hi, my name is Miriam. I am a 28-year-old ER nurse, and I never imagined my life would turn into a nightmare on my own wedding day. I arrived at the venue 1 hour and 45 minutes late because on the way there, I had to save a man suffering a massive heart attack. When I finally pushed open the heavy oak doors, still wearing my sweat-drenched and dirt-stained scrubs, my heart dropped. Standing at the altar was my younger sister. She was wearing my exact custom-made wedding dress, smiling radiantly right beside my fiancé. Welcome to the channel. If you love stories of shocking betrayals and ultimate karma, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's get back to the drama. I stood frozen in the doorway, gasping for air. I expected my parents to rush over, panicked about my 2-hour disappearance, asking if I was hurt. Instead, they marched up to me with cold, calculating glares. They only cared about their precious reputation in front of the elite guests. My mother looked at my dirty uniform with absolute disgust. "At least your sister showed up when it mattered to save this family from utter humiliation," she sneered loudly. My father coldly crossed his arms. The venue was paid for and the guests were waiting. "We couldn't let your reckless irresponsibility ruin the event." My fiancé didn't even drop my sister's hand. I swallowed the sharp blade of betrayal. I didn't scream, and I didn't shed a single tear. I refused to give them the satisfaction. I lifted my chin, turned on my heel, and prepared to walk out of their toxic lives forever. But just as I reached for the handle, the massive doors behind me swung violently open and a powerful man walked in. 2 hours earlier, the oppressive southern heat radiated off the road, shaded by ancient oaks heading toward downtown New Orleans. I was rushing toward the historic French mansion for my wedding ceremony, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror. I smiled brightly at the protective plastic covering my custom-made wedding dress, which hung carefully in the back seat, waiting for the most important moment of my life. Suddenly, a black luxury SUV driving just ahead of me completely lost control. The massive vehicle swerved violently across the lanes and slammed its brakes, leaving a long trail of thick black smoke before skidding violently onto the grassy shoulder. My emergency room instincts immediately kicked in, instantly overriding any anxious thoughts about my incredibly tight schedule. I pulled my car over safely, threw the hazard lights on, and sprinted toward the damaged vehicle. Peering through the shattered driver's side window, I saw a middle-aged man slumped heavily over the steering wheel. He was clutching the left side of his chest with a terrifyingly pale face and blue lips, displaying the undeniable textbook signs of a massive cardiac event. Without a single second of hesitation, I yanked the heavy car door open and dragged his lifeless body out onto the scorching hot asphalt. The intense heat of the pavement immediately burned through my thin uniform pants, but I could not afford to care about the physical pain. I quickly checked his carotid artery for a pulse and found absolutely nothing. He was flatlining right in front of me on the desolate side of the highway. I immediately interlaced my fingers, locked my elbows, and began performing continuous chest compressions. Pushing down hard and fast on the center of his sternum, I counted the rhythm out loud to maintain the necessary pace, while sweat poured down my forehead and fiercely stung my eyes. Every single compression required immense physical effort from my entire body, but my professional duty refused to let him slip away under my watch. "Stay with me, sir. Do not give up now," I yelled at the unconscious stranger, pressing down with every ounce of strength I had left in my exhausted arms. Several passing vehicles finally stopped, and a frantic female bystander rushed over with wide, panicked eyes. "I already called emergency services. The ambulance is less than 3 minutes away," the terrified woman shouted over the roaring noise of the busy highway. "Keep watching the road and flag them down immediately," I ordered her between my heavy, ragged breaths, refusing to stop the grueling compressions even as my shoulders burned with agonizing fatigue. Minutes felt like grueling hours until the blaring sirens of the emergency responders finally pierced the heavy, humid air. A trained team of paramedics rushed out with their heavy medical equipment, quickly taking over the chaotic scene. They sliced his shirt open, applied a portable defibrillator to his bare chest, and delivered a powerful electrical shock. That crucial intervention finally restored a weak but steady pulse on their portable monitor. As they loaded the stabilized patient onto the stretcher and safely secured the heavy ambulance doors, I stood on the side of the road panting heavily and completely covered in grime. I looked down at my watch, and a wave of absolute panic washed over my entire body. I was incredibly late. I sprinted back to my vehicle, slammed the gas pedal to the floor, and began a desperate race against time toward the wedding venue. As the ambulance sirens faded completely into the distance, I had absolutely no idea that the man I had just snatched from the jaws of death was one of the most powerful and wealthy billionaires in the entire state of Louisiana. Just as the humiliation threatened to completely swallow me whole, the loud grinding of the door hinges abruptly sliced through the suffocating atmosphere of the banquet hall. An imposing man entered the grand room seated in a specialized medical wheelchair, accompanied closely by a private physician monitoring a portable device. I immediately recognized his face beneath his pale complexion. He had regained consciousness in the intensive care unit only a short while ago. Upon waking up, he had ruthlessly ordered his executive assistant to utilize every available resource to track down the exact identity and current location of the nurse who had performed his roadside rescue. He then signed his discharge papers against strict medical advice, refusing to wait for further observation, and demanded his security team transport him directly to this historic venue. The previously chaotic room instantly froze into a deathly uncomfortable silence. The bewildered guests instinctively parted like the Red Sea, creating a wide path to make way for his heavily guarded entourage. Whispers rapidly rippled through the elite crowd as the wealthy attendees quickly recognized the unexpected visitor. It was Jefferson, one of the most notoriously ruthless and powerful real estate tycoons in all of New Orleans. His sudden presence in such a vulnerable physical state still commanded absolute awe and undeniable authority over the entire room. The sheer exclusivity of his high society status made the attendees hold their breath. He wheeled himself forward with a profoundly stoic expression, completely ignoring the dramatic gasps and murmurs echoing around him. His sharp, calculating gaze cut directly through the dense crowd until it landed squarely on Brody and my parents, standing frozen near the altar. The sheer weight of his intense stare made my family physically shrink back in absolute terror. Brody instinctively dropped his hands to his sides, his arrogant demeanor evaporating in an instant. Jefferson did not raise his voice to scream or shout, but his deep, resonant tone carried an absolutely lethal edge that echoed throughout the silent room. "This woman just saved my life exactly 2 hours ago," Jefferson declared, coldly ensuring every single person in the hall heard his declaration. "And this is how you treat her." That brutally concise sentence violently shattered the carefully constructed illusion my parents had presented to their high society friends. The devastating truth hung heavily in the air, instantly turning Brody's face a sickening shade of pale. My mother and father stood entirely paralyzed, their mouths opening and closing like suffocating fish, utterly incapable of formulating a single hypocritical excuse to defend their horrific actions. The surrounding guests shifted their judgmental glares away from my stained uniform and aimed their absolute disdain directly at the stage where the opportunistic groom and his stolen bride were currently standing. The social ruin my parents feared had just been delivered to them by the most influential man in the city. Jefferson did not waste another breath offering any grand moral lectures or teaching the room about basic human decency. Men of his immense stature never bothered arguing with people they deemed beneath their notice. "You owe these pathetic individuals absolutely nothing," Jefferson stated calmly, looking up at me with profound respect, reflecting in his weary eyes. "Please allow me to escort you out of this suffocating place." He subtly signaled his imposing bodyguards with a slight nod of his head. The large men immediately stepped forward in perfect synchronization to clear a wide, unobstructed path through the sea of stunned guests. I lifted my chin, holding my head high with newfound strength, and left the ruins of my former life behind without casting a single backward glance at my family. I walked proudly alongside his medical wheelchair, stepping out of the oppressive mansion and into the cool evening air where his specialized transport vehicle was waiting. The next morning, the chilling air inside our shared apartment touched my skin like a razor-sharp reminder of the absolute end. Instead of throwing a hysterical tantrum or smashing our framed photographs against the living room walls, I maintained a terrifyingly calm demeanor while methodically packing my personal belongings. I moved through the familiar rooms with mechanical precision, folding my clothes and carefully gathering my essential documents while actively erasing every lingering trace of my existence from the place that once housed our deceitful promises. The profound silence in the apartment felt incredibly heavy, yet it provided the perfect environment for me to detach my emotions entirely from the devastating reality of his betrayal. I systematically emptied the drawers and cleared the bathroom shelves, ensuring that I left absolutely nothing behind that could tie me to a man who had cowardly traded our future for his own selfish vanity. Leaving the empty apartment behind without shedding a single tear, I drove directly to a reputable property lawyer's office, located in the heart of the bustling business district. I needed to establish an impenetrable financial fortress around myself immediately by thoroughly clarifying every complex legal procedure regarding our shared assets. Sitting across from the stern attorney, I meticulously separated the properties and bank accounts registered solely under my name, initiating the immediate unlinking of my pristine credit profile from his notoriously irresponsible spending habits. We drafted ironclad legal documents to permanently revoke his authorized user status on my high-limit credit cards, ensuring he could no longer drain the hard-earned financial resources I had built through years of grueling emergency room night shifts. The lawyer efficiently outlined the necessary steps to remove my financial liability from our shared residential lease, severing the monetary lifelines that allowed him to live far beyond his actual means. We also drafted official notices to legally block any future unauthorized transactions under my identity. Just as I finished finalizing the aggressive legal paperwork and returned to the apartment building to collect my remaining suitcases, Brody suddenly appeared in the hallway wearing a remarkably pathetic and remorseful expression. He desperately tried to utilize his classic psychological manipulation tactics, attempting to gaslight me by shifting the blame for the catastrophic wedding entirely onto external circumstances rather than his own unforgivable choices. He wept pathetic crocodile tears and frantically begged me not to withdraw my name from our joint checking accounts, fully realizing that he desperately relied on my steady income to maintain his lavish daily lifestyle. Watching the man who had humiliated me yesterday, now groveling for financial security, completely destroyed whatever lingering respect I might have harbored for him. Brody desperately grabbed my hand with trembling fingers, his voice cracking pitifully as he tried to evoke my sympathy. I was forced by my parents. Please do not cancel the deposits. We can still start over from the beginning. I forcefully pushed his hand away with absolute disgust, staring directly into his deceitful eyes without demonstrating a single ounce of hesitation or mercy. My lawyer will send you the papers. Never call this number again. I decisively grabbed the sturdy handles of my heavy luggage and walked confidently past his trembling figure without casting another backward glance. The frantic apologies spilling from his mouth faded into meaningless background noise as I stepped out into the brightly lit corridor, feeling an immense weight finally lifting off my exhausted shoulders. I firmly grasped the brass handle and slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind me, the loud, resounding echo finalizing the permanent termination of all legal, emotional, and financial ties with the traitorous man I had almost married. Walking toward the elevator, I breathed a deep sigh of pure relief, knowing I had successfully reclaimed absolute control over my own future. 2 weeks passed, and the frantic pace of the emergency room became my perfect life preserver. I completely buried myself in the relentless demanding physical requirements of my grueling consecutive night shifts, actively utilizing the intense boundary between life and death to systematically heal my lingering emotional trauma. Focusing my entire existence on rapidly stabilizing critical patients effectively forced my exhausted mind away from the bitter memories of absolute betrayal, allowing me to successfully reclaim my unwavering confidence in my inherent professional worth. The highly chaotic environment filled with constantly beeping monitors and rushing medical stretchers provided a profound sense of absolute purpose that no deceitful relationship could ever manage to destroy. During a rare, quiet moment of temporary respite near the expansive main lobby, I noticed a sudden professional commotion surrounding the newly inaugurated diagnostic imaging wing. Jefferson unexpectedly appeared amidst the busy hospital administrators, presenting himself not as a vulnerable recovering patient, but functioning strictly in his official public capacity as the primary financial sponsor for the advanced emergency medical equipment. This sophisticated logistical gesture was a remarkably subtle maneuver on his part, intentionally designed to deliberately create a completely natural, professional opportunity for us to cross paths without imposing any unwanted emotional pressure on my closely guarded personal space. He easily spotted me standing near the central nurses' station and confidently walked over, offering a highly respectful and genuinely polite smile that immediately disarmed any defensive professional barriers. I came to personally observe exactly how the newly donated machinery is operating in a realistic clinical setting and, incidentally, to officially thank the most outstanding CPR expert in this entire hospital. He said smoothly, his deep voice carrying a comforting tone of genuine appreciation, rather than the typical arrogance usually associated with extreme wealth. I maintained my strict professional clinical composure, though his incredibly thoughtful and entirely unexpected presence undeniably brought a small, welcoming wave of emotional comfort to my exhausting shift. That is simply the fundamental medical responsibility of any dedicated emergency room nurse, but I am genuinely very glad to see you recovering so remarkably well from such a massive cardiac event. I replied steadily, meeting his intense gaze with absolute professional equality and mutual respect. Recognizing the strict time constraints of my designated break period, he gracefully suggested stepping briefly away from the heavily sterile clinical environment. We took a slow, deliberate walk around the quiet, beautifully landscaped hospital grounds, seamlessly transitioning our engaging conversation entirely away from my recent personal domestic disaster. Instead, we enthusiastically engaged in a deeply passionate professional discussion regarding the glaring systemic vulnerabilities hidden deep within the current community healthcare infrastructure. I eagerly shared my long-held, heavily researched ideas about establishing comprehensive, entirely free first aid and CPR training classes specifically designed to educate underprivileged residents living in the surrounding marginalized neighborhoods. Jefferson listened to my detailed medical proposals with intense, undivided attention, fully analyzing the complex logistical aspects of my humanitarian vision with the exceptionally sharp, calculating mind of a seasoned real estate tycoon. Our highly stimulating conversation flowed effortlessly through the humid evening air, remaining completely devoid of the superficial power dynamics typically associated with interacting with elite billionaires. As my brief break gradually approached its inevitable conclusion, he gently extended a highly respectful invitation for a casual dinner over the upcoming weekend. He carefully framed the invitation strictly as a valuable opportunity to further discuss the logistical implementation of the Community Healthcare Educational Initiative. I confidently accepted his gracious offer, turned around to walk back through the automatic sliding glass doors, and marched straight into the bustling trauma center with an incredibly clear mind. This peaceful interaction definitively marked the solid beginning of a mature, meaningful friendship firmly rooted in mutual professional respect and shared humanitarian understanding. 3 months later, the perfect facade of the traitors began to crack under the crushing weight of their mounting bills. The ruthless reality of the rigorous American financial system finally caught up with Serena and Brody, as their incredibly reckless spending habits completely destroyed their fragile economic stability. Accustomed to a lavish lifestyle they could no longer fund through my diligently managed bank accounts, the newlywed couple quickly maxed out their remaining credit limits while blindly ignoring the relentless incoming statements and aggressive daily calls from relentless collection agencies. The catastrophic situation deteriorated exponentially when Brody unexpectedly lost his lucrative corporate job due to his declining professional performance and chronic absenteeism, rendering him entirely incapable of meeting their exorbitant monthly mortgage installments and rapidly accumulating high-interest fees that severely penalized their delinquent accounts. The true disaster completely bypassed the irresponsible young couple and struck my childhood home directly when a formal foreclosure notice arrived in my parents' mailbox via certified legal mail. Driven by their desperate need to continuously maintain upper-class appearances and unconditionally pamper their favorite child, my father and mother had blindly co-signed the massive residential loan for Serena without fully comprehending the severe legal consequences of their arrogant actions. Their foolish vanity had legally bound their own hard-earned assets and historically pristine credit history directly to my sister's catastrophic financial failures, officially giving the ruthless banking institution the absolute legal right to seize their primary property, to recover the massive unpaid debt, and evict them from the premises. Utter desperation ultimately forced my father to completely abandon his usual arrogant pride and explicitly ambush me near my designated parking spot right outside the hospital's trauma center. He looked remarkably haggard, with dark, heavy circles under his bloodshot eyes and a deeply wrinkled suit, pacing nervously beside the driver's side of my vehicle as I finished my grueling evening shift. Instead of humbly apologizing for his unforgivable past cruelty or simply asking for a reasonable personal loan to cover his immediate living expenses, his toxic entitlement flared up once again. He audaciously attempted to manipulate me into exploiting my steadily blossoming relationship with Jefferson, aggressively demanding that I forcefully use my wealthy partner's immense corporate influence and vast financial resources to secure a critical refinance loan to miraculously salvage their sinking real estate portfolio. He aggressively stepped forward to physically block the front bumper of my vehicle and barked his absurd orders with a sickening level of desperate entitlement. "You are dating a billionaire now, so just tell him to guarantee the refinance. Are you really going to sit there and watch your parents lose their home?" I calmly turned the ignition key to start the powerful engine and looked directly at his panicked, sweating face through the half-rolled down window without displaying a single ounce of sympathetic emotion. "That debt strictly bears your name and your precious daughter's name. Never drag me into this mess." Without waiting for his inevitable outburst of toxic rage or further pathetic emotional manipulation, I firmly pressed the gas pedal and drove smoothly out of the hospital parking lot. I watched his stunned, defeated figure standing frozen amidst the empty asphalt rapidly shrinking in my rearview mirror until he completely disappeared from my sight and my life forever. Establishing that impenetrable ironclad legal and emotional boundary brought me a profound sense of absolute peace, confirming that I felt absolutely no lingering guilt or misplaced familial obligation toward the specific people who had heartlessly betrayed me. I deliberately chose to drive away from their self-inflicted chaos, fully rejecting their desperate pleas and leaving them completely alone to face the devastating, uncompromising consequences of their own undeniable karma that was systematically dismantling their carefully constructed world. That winter brought the most brilliant beginning I had ever built with my own hands. The comprehensive community CPR training initiative I passionately launched achieved an absolutely resounding success across the entire metropolitan area. Fueled by tireless dedication and rigorous logistical planning, the ambitious educational program successfully expanded into multiple underserved districts that previously lacked basic healthcare resources. We systematically educated over 3,000 local residents in crucial life-saving techniques, fundamentally transforming ordinary citizens into capable first responders. This massive educational campaign effectively bridged a critical gap in emergency healthcare accessibility. Witnessing those diverse community members confidently mastering chest compressions and portable defibrillator usage brought an indescribable sense of professional fulfillment that completely overshadowed any lingering shadows from my past. Because of this unprecedented community impact, I was profoundly honored to stand on a grand stage to formally accept the state's most prestigious Medical Dedication Award. Holding that heavy crystal trophy under the bright auditorium spotlights firmly validated my professional capabilities and my unwavering resilience. The resounding applause echoing through the elegant venue definitively proved that my profound personal growth existed entirely independent of the devastating familial tragedies that had once attempted to destroy my spirit. I had successfully forged a brilliant, undeniable legacy using nothing but my own medical expertise and an unbreakable desire to heal others. The prestigious recognition solidified my reputation, completely erasing the false narrative of the irresponsible runaway bride my family had maliciously tried to paint. Waiting patiently just off the main stage, Jefferson held a magnificent bouquet of fresh lilies, with an expression of overwhelming pride illuminating his handsome features. "This extraordinary achievement is entirely yours," he said warmly, his deep voice carrying immense respect as he handed me the beautiful flowers. "I only opened the door, but you are the one who boldly walked through it." His profound words perfectly encapsulated the beautiful evolution of our remarkable connection. Our bond gracefully transitioned from a highly synchronized friendship into a profoundly deep and mature romantic love. We did not play toxic psychological games or desperately rely on each other for basic emotional survival. Instead, we proudly stood side by side as true equal partners, mutually supporting our respective ambitious endeavors while sharing a profoundly peaceful domestic life. His immense corporate influence never once overshadowed my medical achievements, and my fierce independence perfectly complemented his highly demanding executive lifestyle. We functioned as a unified team built on absolute trust, finding immense joy in shared visions rather than superficial societal validation. One quiet Sunday morning, while casually browsing the local Financial Tribune over a cup of hot coffee, a familiar legal notice unexpectedly caught my eye. The objective journalistic print officially confirmed that my parents had formally filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy following the devastating foreclosure of their primary estate. The brief legal article detailed how their remaining seized assets were thoroughly liquidated by merciless creditors, permanently forcing them to relocate into a notoriously impoverished, rundown housing complex on the dangerous outskirts of the city. Their insatiable greed and pathetic obsession with maintaining upper-class appearances had ultimately orchestrated their absolute financial destruction. Staring intently at the printed names of the people who had heartlessly betrayed my trust, I waited for a sudden surge of vindictive joy or a wave of lingering sorrow to wash over my chest. Instead, my mind remained absolutely still and profoundly undisturbed. There was no burning hatred left in my heart, nor was there even the slightest trace of sympathetic pity. They had simply become irrelevant strangers existing in a distant reality I no longer inhabited. I calmly folded the crisp newspaper, tossed it directly into the recycling bin, and walked back into the sunlit kitchen to peacefully enjoy my morning. 1 year after that fateful day, I stood before the mirror in a wedding dress once again, but this time my soul was completely at peace. the luxurious fabric draped perfectly over my silhouette, devoid of the suffocating anxiety that had entirely consumed my previous engagement. Our private, highly elegant wedding ceremony took place on the polished wooden deck of a magnificent superyacht, gently cruising through the tranquil, sunlit waters of the Gulf. We deliberately chose to completely abandon the superficial grandeur of traditional high society banquets, intentionally surrounding ourselves only with my dedicated emergency room colleagues, his most trusted associates, and the genuine friends who truly respected our profound bond. The soft acoustic music playing in the background perfectly complemented the rhythmic sound of the crashing waves, creating an environment of pure sanctuary. I felt an incredible sense of liberation knowing that every single person present genuinely cherished my happiness, entirely replacing the toxic judgment that once dictated my family's every interaction. As the spectacular golden sunset painted the evening sky in vibrant shades of orange and purple, I walked confidently down the aisle toward the man who completely understood my core values. Standing gracefully before the ordained officiant, the gentle ocean breeze carrying the faint scent of salt water, I experienced a sudden, overwhelming realization of absolute victory. My ultimate triumph did not stem from miraculously marrying into unimaginable wealth or successfully entering the exclusive ranks of the elite upper class. Instead, my true victory was firmly rooted in successfully reclaiming my shattered self-esteem and fiercely establishing my undeniable inherent worth. I realized that the devastating loss of my biological family and my treacherous former fiancé was actually the greatest blessing disguised as a catastrophe. By forcefully severing those parasitic connections, I had finally created the necessary space to cultivate a life that authentically mirrored my deepest passions and humanitarian goals. Jefferson gently grasped both of my hands in his warm grip, his usually commanding voice cracking with profound, unexpected emotion as he looked deeply into my eyes. "That day, you did not save a billionaire," he whispered passionately, ensuring his sincere words reached the depths of my heart in front of the smiling officiant. "You saved a fragile human being, and now that human being willingly promises to spend the absolute rest of his life endlessly loving you." Looking back on my turbulent journey from a heartbroken emergency room nurse to a powerfully independent woman, I recognized two invaluable truths. First, you must never compromise your fundamental self-worth for individuals who merely view you as a convenient disposable tool, even if those toxic individuals happen to share your exact bloodline. The harsh reality is that biological ties do not automatically guarantee genuine loyalty or unconditional love. Maintaining your absolute financial and emotional independence inevitably serves as the strongest, most impenetrable shield a woman can ever possess against malicious manipulation. Second, the most ruthless and highest-class form of revenge never involves actively attempting to destroy the malicious people who hurt you. The ultimate retribution is deliberately focusing all your combined energy on building a gloriously brilliant, highly successful life that permanently exists completely out of reach from those who cowardly turn their backs on you. Thank you for faithfully accompanying Miriam's incredible journey of fierce resilience to the very end here on Revenge Mode. Between the two essential life lessons presented in today's emotional episode, which one do you strongly feel resonates the most with your own real-life experiences? Please leave your insightful perspective in the comments section below, as we truly look forward to reading your diverse thoughts and engaging with your personal stories.